Hi everyone, LJ Anderson here. Today I'm going to be doing a book review of Kingdom's Dawn by Chuck Black. But before I get into that, let me give a couple of bits of information for you. First, I apologize for the background. It was a nice, pretty bookshelf with lots of books on it, but we are moving. So, unfortunately, this video and probably quite a few of the future videos will either be of a mostly blank or blank bookshelf or some other background completely, as we're going to be living in a motorhome for a little while. That said, hopefully here in the next couple months I will have a good setup again, which will be nice. Second, I wanted just to give a little bit of background as to what I hope to accomplish with these videos. So I am also posting the same book reviews on my website, ljandersonbooks.com, and these blogs are going to be more formal, more to the point than the book reviews on YouTube. On YouTube, I want to just kind of give my thoughts. And kind of follow a general outline, but I don't want to, be trying to have precise wording and all of that. So we'll see how it goes. But without further ado, let's get into the book review. Kingdom's Dawn is a Christian fantasy book by Chuck Black. Fairly old at this point. I want to say it was originally published in 2001. Which is not a problem. I mean, it doesn't really age in that sense. And it is about a youth named Leonard. I always say Leonard, but if anyone actually knows how his name is supposed to be pronounced, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Leonard is what I'm going to go with, though. He is a young boy who is growing up as a farmer, kind of a little bit of a typical story beginning for fantasy books. Farmer goes off into this big quest, but he's not the typical farmer in that his father's training him to be a swordsman, and he just doesn't really understand that. Why would a farmer need to be a skilled swordsman? Leonard goes on this big adventure, and it's essentially, the way I would describe it is it's the Bible, or this series is the Bible in parable form. However, this specific book is Genesis and the first couple of chapters of Exodus in parable form. So it goes... slight spoiler if you know the biblical story, goes from Seth to Moses. Like I said, if you know the Bible, it's going to spoil it a little bit for you. So that's kind of the gist of the story. But what are, who's it written to? What is, who is the audience? I am not, the audience. I was when I first read it back when I was in high school, 15 years ago, whatever that was. Ish. I was the proper audience at the time, but I have read these books off and on throughout the years, and I did just read it again for this review because I wanted it to be an accurate review. But even though it's designed for probably middle school, YA is probably too old for this book, and as far as like who the target audience is, this was designed for probably middle school. That said, I still find it entertaining to read. It is a super easy read, very, very quick, very simple, except for random words that you're like, what middle schooler knows that word? What adult knows that word? So sometimes you'll run into those. But that's kind of who it's targeted to, but I still think that it's good for adults, especially if you're reading it with your kids. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So things I liked about this book. First off, I really love the attempt to take the Bible and put it into a parable form and make it a little more exciting for younger kids, especially boys. I know a lot of girls really love these books, but for boys, and this was my experience, the Bible was very boring. I kind of hated it growing up. I absolutely love it now, but growing up, I was not into reading the Bible. Though my parents really wanted me to, I just didn't enjoy it. So the fact that I was willing to read these as a kid and enjoyed them, and even back then enjoyed the biblical parallels because I knew the Bible fairly well, but I just didn't like reading it. I enjoyed that aspect of seeing, oh hey, I know that story. This is from the Bible, and we're following, this person, or following Seth, or we're following Moses. And so that was actually something even as a high schooler that I enjoyed, but I really enjoy it now. And then I also really, really like, so at the back here, there are a bunch of, discussion questions for each chapter. And I love the idea of that, especially if you have kids of your own and you want to read these books to them. This is an excellent way to engage your kids with a fun story that has biblical truth in it that we can then take a little further and go, okay, so you read this story, who does this person represent? Obviously the king represents God in the story. There are questions about the king and his nature, and I really like the idea of having those discussion questions at the back. They don't interrupt your story at all. It doesn't, it's not something that you run into until the end. So if you want to use them at each chapter, you have to know that they're there in the first place. But I think it's worthwhile. Is a really good thing for parents, especially when they're reading it to their kids. So those are kind of the main things I like about the book. I enjoy that it's an easy read. These are something that I can pick up and be done in an hour, well, probably not an hour, a couple hours. If I'm just sitting down and reading, it can be a quick, afternoon I have off and I want to do a little bit of reading. This is a quick read. And it's a fun story. So now on to things that I didn't like about the book. And I'm not going to engage too much with this because a lot of them come later in my theological engagement, which will be a little bit of spoilers, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so things I didn't like about this book. One, it's too easy. And I know I just got done talking about how nice it was that it is an easy read that I can just pick up, read a couple hours, and be done with it. But it's like very easy to read. It's to the point of where it doesn't challenge me, one way or the other. It's just kind of a fun, quick read, and I desire more than that. And in fact, what this book does, this series actually, is it makes me want something similar written for adults. Something a little thicker, a little weightier, both in like content and, heft. But I have found that doesn't seem to be all that normal. It seems to be to me that Christian books, Christian fantasy books in particular, seem to be targeted at a younger age. And I mean, that's great and all, but I have struggled to find something that I enjoy as, an adult. If you have any recommendations for Christian fantasy, swords, knights, medieval-ish stuff, I would love to hear what it is, because I want to read it and then do a review on it. That said, I also I don't want to know how much I want to say about it, but I am working on a Christian fantasy series that I believe will be a little bit older, targeted at a little bit older, but I don't want to say much because it's years from fruition, and so there's that. I typically work on Christian nonfiction, Christian theology books or apologetics books. Those are the things that I mainly work on, but I do have this desire to write Christian fantasy, and I'm like 20-some thousand words into it. But it's a long ways from being done, particularly because there are other projects that need to happen first. So there's that. Maybe someday you'll find this video and be like, oh, hey, that's actually out. Anyway, so I would really love for this concept, or even just a Christian fantasy, to be written to adults. I would love that. So that's kind of something I didn't like about this book. But also, that doesn't really detract from the book. That's just, I'm not the target audience. Back in the day I was, and I liked it a little bit more because it was more for me. But, today it's not exactly my... I'm not exactly the target audience. And that's fine. So the next part has a few spoilers. I think they're really important spoilers for you to, know if you haven't read it yet, because this is the theological engagement portion. I try to avoid as many spoilers as I can in books, but this is one area. If I can't do theological engagement, so say it's a non-Christian book that just assumes that God doesn't exist, or that they don't even bring up the idea, I will instead do philosophical engagement, because every book is teaching something, and I think we as Christians should be wise to that and be careful with what we're just accepting. But also, it opens up a lot of books. If you're somebody who's like, well, I don't know that I want to read that. Well, but it's a clean book, but it's got something in it that I'm not so sure about. You can read it, but go into it with okay, so I'm enjoying this, but what is this trying to teach me, and how can I not be taken in by the teaching? It's a good way of reading things that aren't, or watching things even, that are not, necessarily good for Christians. At least they're not, they don't help your faith or anything like that. And they just kind of seem like time wasters. There can be actually some really good value in engaging with them in that way. So, and this is something that is unique to my channel. I intend to always try to engage with my books that I review, theologically or philosophically, depending on which one makes the most sense. In this case, we're talking about a parable of the Bible, so it makes way more sense that I would engage with this theologically than philosophically. That said, some slight spoilers are ahead, but I think they are worthwhile to hear anyway. So, what do I rate this book at as far as theology goes? And if you've ever heard me talk about these books, the screen that I am showing you right now probably is surprising to you. why is my scale so far down towards neutral? Because I actually give really high praise to these books, and I would recommend that youths read them and engage with them. So this is so low on the scale because of one major problem that sends shockwaves through the entire book. And believe it or not, that problem is no magic. There is no magic in this book. And you might go, whoa, hey, that's great. It's a book that my kids can read that doesn't teach them about magic? That's awesome. Yeah, so on the surface, it might seem that way. The lack of magic in a book about God and a book about the Bible is not good. If you dig down just beyond that, there's no magic. Magic is bad. You will quickly realize that magic is necessary to rightly illumine God. God is not natural. And if you look up a definition of what magic means, it means, something happens seemingly based on something supernatural. I feel like I butchered that. But it's essentially that it's something that's not natural that happens or seems to happen or seems to be not natural. All that to say, God is supernatural. By definition, he is magic, if we want to go using that definition. And what he does, anytime God goes against the natural order and does a miracle, anytime, God created the universe, which was just once, but when God created the universe, that was magic. We call it a miracle, but it was magic. The definition of magic perfectly aligns with what God did. So when you have a book that is focused on God and his word, and that has no magic, which is very clearly something that Chuck Black wanted to do. He didn't want magic in here. Otherwise, the way that he had to write this to keep magic out doesn't make sense. So he did not want magic in this book series. The lack of magic becomes seriously problematic when we see its results. So again, on the surface, you might say, oh, there's no magic, that's a good thing. But you start digging a little deeper and you start running into these serious problems. And I'm going to give just a few of them, and these are the spoilers. I guess no magic is a spoiler, but I'm pretty sure that Chuck Black would say that to discuss the book as a selling point of the book, so I'm not going to count that as a spoiler. These next parts are spoilers. So, for example, the flood is in the book. Why? Because, well, it's Genesis, early Genesis. And this is a book on Genesis. So, the book addresses the flood, and we have come to a point of issue, a point of, what is that called? We have come to a problem. And the flood in the book is a natural occurrence done by creatures. They're tiny creatures called the Vector Deluge, which is a bunch of tiny creatures that come and devour everything in their path. Well, the flood in the Bible is God's divine judgment on the world for its evil. In this book, it is a natural disaster that happens that everyone has to run away from, and that's it. Like, there's no deeper, like, God is mad at the wickedness of the people. it's just, oh, hey, there's this danger coming, run away. Oh, you didn't. Sorry, you all died. Basically, a divine judgment becomes a natural disaster, and that's it. There's nothing more to the story. Then we also get a powerless God. So the king is, God in the story. But he has no power. So when we get the story of Adam and Eve, which we do get in here, Adam and Eve are picked out of an already existing world, an already existing set of nations, to be a kingdom for the king. And you go, okay, well, that's fine. That's just a retelling of the story. But when we think about that further, there's a reason why that happened. Because God, the king, has no magic. He has no ability to create the universe. He has no power to create the world as we know it and to have an Adam and Eve. And so what we get is a God that is just kind of absolutely powerless and has no ability to do anything miraculous or magical. That's a problem. It's a direct attack on God's nature. It's a direct attack on the Bible. And it's packaged in such a way that it's like, oh, this is a good thing. No, this is not a good thing. We have gone astray from solid theology and gone off into myths. This is not a good thing. Even the king doesn't even have the ability to heal somebody. It is a flower that has strangely magical properties in that it can heal basically any wound. But it's not the king's creation. It's just a natural flower that if you make an ointment from it, you can heal wounds. And if you can breathe in the air that has the pollen and stuff from the plants, then you can be healed, even from the worst wounds ever. But that's not God's doing. That's not the king's doing. That's just a natural thing in the world. That's just really problematic. It's not good. But we also even get to the point where this is actually kind of spoiler for the series, but it also it's evident in here, but we'll see it later. The king and his son are, the prince are the major figures in the books, in the sense that they are, God and his son, the father and the son. What we never, ever, 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 ever see mention of is the Holy Spirit. There is no Holy Spirit. Now you might ask why. Well, that also goes back to no magic. How could you have a Holy Spirit, something that's immaterial, someone that is, invisible, someone that dwells in the hearts and minds of the people, without magic? You can't. And so, this book attacks the Trinity. I believe unintentionally. I don't think Chuck Black is opposed to the Holy Spirit. But that is the practical outplaying of the removal of magic from a book that is about God and his word. So, an entire member, an entire person of the Trinity is just deleted, gone forever. There is no third person of the Trinity. There is only the Father and the Son, and it's problematic. That's all I'm going to say. And I'm not going to go any deeper than that. You can see there are many other examples, where magic, or the lack of magic, is a problem. And it brings how good the theology is of this book down a massive degree, simply because it is anti-biblical, and it attacks the nature of God. But all the other theology in this is really solid. It has really good examples of discipleship. It has, really good discussions on, like, I've never met the king, so, like, do I even really believe in him? Can I keep my faith in this hard trial if I have never even met, this guy, the king? And really good discussions, and really good theology throughout, except for the lack of no magic, which just, like I said, sends shockwaves throughout the entire series and is just problematic. So that is the book in a nutshell. That is dealing with the theology and an explanation of why the scale is so low. But would I recommend this book, and to whom would I recommend it to? Well, I would absolutely recommend this book. The theological issues are significant, but I think if you are aware of them and are able to, especially if you're reading this to your kids, if you're able to go, oh hey, so there's no magic in this series, which might be good, but here's the problems with it, and you're able to explain that to your kids and demonstrate that there is such a thing as good magic. If it's from God, it's good. It can be just as valuable. It's a very, very worthwhile book and series, in my opinion. If you are or know any middle schoolers or high schoolers, I highly recommend this series for them to read. Or for younger kids, or even if you want to, if you regularly read stories to your middle schoolers and high schoolers, I actually really recommend reading this to your kids or with your kids, because there's a lot of good discussion that can be had, and it is worthwhile. Even though very easy read, not really designed for adults. Actually, if you're an adult and you just want to read it, go for it. Like, I still read these. I don't have an issue with that. And it's a very simple read, but there's good things in it, and I think even adults can learn from it and enjoy it. So, yeah, that's my book review of the book by Chuck Black, Kingdom's Dawn, in the Kingdom series. The next one that I do is going to be, you'll actually get two nonfiction books back to back, because I have done a review on my blog of the book Surviving and Thriving in Seminary, but I haven't done a YouTube video, so that will come out after this video. And then the next nonfiction video, which will be on the normal third Wednesday of the month, will be Salvation by Allegiance Alone by Matthew Bates. Very interesting book. I look forward to talking about it. But yeah, if you liked this book review and would like to see more, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, God bless.